Yes. Right there. Oh, we have two comments.
Good morning. Welcome to Tees. Welcome to Prague. It's nice to be in a room that we actually have a view, although I think only the chairs get to look that way. But Pavan was nice enough to show you what we're missing on the slide. Our usual information is available on Data Tracker and on the Tools page. I really like the Tools page as a way to get to Etherpad. As usual, we would like to ask for folks to jump on Etherpad and contribute to the interactive note-taking. It's very useful if you make comments to go onto that page and make sure your comments were captured appropriately. I'd like to say this is the usual note well, but it actually isn't. There are some very subtle changes to this note well. It came out just right before this meeting. The largest and most significant change is that we have an updated document covering IPR disclosure. That's RFC 8179, and it was just published in May. The intent of that document is to clarify when disclosures are required, when they're not required. Please take a look, familiarize yourself with it. The most substantive point has not changed, which is if you contribute in any way to the activities of the IETF, you can sit in this room, but even if you raise your hand, hum, make some faces, you're contributing. So if you're contributing anyway, you're subject to the IPR disclosure requirements. Again, familiarize yourself with the new RFC, and by the end of the week, I'm sure you'll be familiar with it. On the administrative side, as usual, we are streaming and recording video and audio, and please jump on Etherpad. We only have 6 people on there right now, and my bet is most of those are just going to watch. So go to that link, the tools page, join in. We will really appreciate it. We also are running Jabber. I'm on Jabber. If anyone else wants to jump on, that's great. We do have a number of people remote, although I don't see the number in front of me at the moment. We also have a few people on Meet Echo and some remote presentations this time. Wrong way. And including our secretary, he is also remote. So where do we stand in terms on documents? We have one RFC that's been published since the last meeting. Thank you, authors. Thank you, working group, for contributing to that. We have no RFCs in the editor's queue, but we have quite a few that are in ISG processing. As you can see, 3 of them are in expert review. We have 1 in last call, including a very interesting, apparently, typo in the IANA section that they were all laughing about. And so if you want a homework assignment, you can go find that. And don't copy that text. And we have 1 waiting for a write-up. We don't have any new errata. We have a couple of documents that are post-working group last call. As has been our practice, we go through detailed status for documents not on the agenda. These documents aren't on the agenda, but they'll be covered in that section, the later section where we give status. And we have a couple of new working group documents. We did receive the work plan from study group 15. There is a response requested, but as usual, it's a little hard to figure out what the right response is to our work plan. If you have any suggestions or comments, as always, send them to the list. We also received a liaison from BBF on Flexi. We run our normal working group IPR process, including the request for confirmation of IPR disclosure and conformance with our rules, both on adoption and last call. Folks are pretty familiar with this. On occasion, this step really slows down the process. We've been pretty good recently, but just keep it in mind. And when you see the IPR poll, please respond. And I'll point out that contributors are required to respond. Participants are required to respond if they contributed in any way in the new definition, which is if you hum even on a document, you have to respond to this poll saying, and you know of IPR, you have to say that you need to ensure that you disclose that IPR. Authors are the only ones who have to say that there's no IPR. Keep discussions going on the mailing list. As always, private discussions are great, but it doesn't bring along the rest of the working group. So if you're having a private discussion and you think that it's generally applicable to a working group document, please bring that onto the mailing list. We have a second session on the agenda. It's Thursday, 1:30 in the afternoon. That is the joint meeting that we've been having the last few, I guess, last couple of years. Loa, I'll blame him for it. He's initiated it. It's a joint session focused on interactions on Yang modules that are being done in each of the groups and making sure that we have some good cross-pollination and synchronization of solutions. And with that, we're at the end of that status, and we'll move on to document status.
So next on the agenda is the working group document status. We have 20 documents in the working group currently. 19 of those are active. There's one that's in expired state. We have 8 on the agenda today, 6 for which we put in a publication request. So that leaves us with 6, and I'll go over the status of each of those in the next few slides. First up is the document that talks about FRR for associated co-routed bidirectional LSPs. We adopted this sometime in May. The authors have published a revision for this since then. The revision covers features like node protection, reversion, and they also added some text talking about procedures handling unidirectional link failures. They intend to add more text pertaining to detour LSPs, and at this point looking for further review. So if this is an item of interest for you, please do reach out to the authors on the list, and they'll be happy to address those. Next is the document that talks about PCCC use cases. We received an update for this yesterday. There's one revision that was published. This covers addresses all the comments that were raised during the adoption poll. The authors also say that they are working on adding another use case to the document. So at this point, please do give this a read and reach out to the authors if you have any questions or concerns. Next is the egress protection document. We did take it to last call in May. There was consensus to move forward with this. At this point, we are waiting on the Shepherd write-up. I'm the Shepherd. I wanted to take this, put in a publication request for this before this meeting, but unfortunately ran into some issues. There's one major issue with respect to SCRO backwards compatibility. There's the protection object that shows up as a sub-object under SCRO. Today we have 2 C types of protection object. Both of them have fixed sizes. In this draft, we are defining multiple sub-TLVs in a protection. So in order to be backwards compatible, you got to introduce a new C type. And if you're going down the route of adding a new C type, there's some simplification that can be done to the procedures. So the intent is to work with authors, make sure this gets resolved, and then we'll take it to publication. Next is the English protection document. It's also in the same boat. We are waiting on the Sherpa write-up. There are some editorial issues that I would like to get cleaned up first before taking it to publication. We'll be working with authors to make sure this gets done in the next few weeks. I don't see the need to take to last call again for this document. For equal protection, given the size of the changes, we may consider taking it to last call. Let's see how that pans out. Next is the schedule resources document. There was one revision published for this, mainly a keep alive. At the last meeting, we put a pin on this and said that we would wait on the document until the corresponding solutions document progresses in PCE. The solutions document is now a working group adopted item in PCE, so it seems like now is a good time to take this to the next stage. I think we can do a poll on this.
Last time we got input from the PCE working group chair, and it'd be good to hear if the PCE working group had an opinion on this, if it's now at a point where they're comfortable progressing this document, or they want to keep holding and give them time to mature the solution that's progressing there.
Julien Meric, PCE co-chair. I don't remember exactly what I said last time, but it remains, it remains your document, so it's up to you to decide how to progress it. So the adoption in the PCE working group, as far as I remember, was clear consensus with clear support behind. So I don't see any open issue from a PCE perspective here to prevent you from progressing if you want to. I don't remember about the details in the document. If it's not too much solution dependent in terms of implementation details, I think you may move that one forward. If you just need a pointer to a PCE document, it's there already, so yeah, your call.
It was as much that the PCE working group had taken on the work as that they feel that the general direction is stable. Not the specifics of the solution, but the general direction. If the general direction was going to change radically, we should hold this document up to make sure it's aligned. If it's just the details, that's okay. We can progress with this one because it's not specific to the details. So it sounds like the general directions is fine and your work running your normal working group process. So there's nothing that would block this going forward.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
So with that, let's do a quick poll. How many of you have read the latest version of this document? Can I get a show of hands, please? Okay. Of those who have read the document,
that was just a few for the minutes.
Of those who have read the document, how many of you think this is ready for last call? About the same number.
About the same number.
So, let's take this to the list.
Yeah, please do read it even before you see anything on the list. And if you have comments, as usual, send them to the list.
Last in this deck is the T metric recording draft. This is the expired draft that I mentioned earlier. There hasn't been any revision for this since last September. At the last meeting, we were looking for volunteers who could help with the progress. Julian has been kind enough to come forward to help with this. We are hoping that we would get an update at least before the next IETF. If there isn't any progress on this by then, I guess we'd have to drop the ball on this. You wouldn't see this, see a dedicated slide for this in this deck going forward. That's all we have in terms of document status. Next is an update on the SR-RSVP coexistence draft. Harish should be giving that.
Hi, my name is Harish Sitaraman. So I just wanted to give an update on this draft. So since the last IETF, it got adopted as a working group document. The authors received some feedback from Martin. We quite good constructive feedback. So we actually went through that and clarified certain parts of the document, mostly providing background text and clarifications. Added Martin as a contributor to the document. We published an O1 version. So in summary, what were the changes? So there's a section 3.3.5 in the document which talks about a certain procedure on how to do SR-RSVP coexistence. So the solution sort of dived into using maximum reservable bandwidth. So this text provides a little bit more clarification on what else could we have done to adjust bandwidth, and it finally ends in the conclusion as to why we picked maximum reservable bandwidth. We also had an appendix. We had introduced this concept called multiplier in the draft. So we had an appendix which offers certain suggestions on what values you could use for the multipliers and what impact does it have depending on what the values of the multiplier are. At this time, we feel there aren't any updates left in the document, and we just request working group last call for the document.
So I believe my co-chair is a co-author on this, so he'll only participate as a contributor here. How many have read this document? It's a few, but it's an okay number. How many think that the document is ready for last call? Almost the same. Does anyone think that there remain issues with the document? No one. I think that's a pretty good indication of where folks in the room think the document is. We will discuss and then take it to the list. Thank you.
Thanks.
Shafai?
Good morning. I'm Xufeng Liu, reporting the status of the T topology model. We still have our regular weekly discussion meetings. Sometimes even got quite a few people, but we are finishing up the discussions. So we are doing some cleanups and fixes, so I think the blocking items have been pretty much cleared. So pretty much we are trying to move this to the last call. We heard that the request, so asking us to move this as quick as possible because implementations are going on. So we're trying to do that. So here's the items we have changed since last IETF sessions. So we now allow multiple instances of interlock IDs. So this is for the multi-layer topology cases. And we added missing TTPs for underlay tunnels to improve the usability. And we added more some additional attributes to the link termination point and tunnel termination point. We improved the handling of the connectivity matrix label. And we work with the T-tunnel model so to have some common groupings and types to be shared. So also read down the generic label modeling to make it better. And address the young doctor's review comments. And finally, we did the style change to move to NMDA compatible models with the state companion model. So some more details on those changes. So here's an interlayer lock ID. So we now allows to have multiple instances of the lock ID. So here we changed from the leaf to a leaf list. The reason for that here is explanation. So in this case, we have the TTP like TTP3 may be used for multiple lock IDs, 1 and 2. So we changed that to allow these cases, and also I think I missed it. Okay. Right, we added a few items to the link termination point and tunnel termination point. This is the feedback from the implementations. They want to have some convenient way to identify those termination points. So we added the admin status name and the operational status. And then we also improved the modeling for the underlay tunnel termination point. In this case, now we want to specify the two end point of the underlay tunnel here. So for that purpose, we added the tunnel termination point for the underlay source and destination. So also we improved the handling of connectivity matrix labels. In some cases like this, if we have a region of some devices here, we change the label from one end to the end. In this case, the label here on one side is 6, changed to 8. To accommodate this kind of use cases, we moved the label restriction set from the common connectivity matrix entry to the source and the destination. We have been working with the TE tunnel models closely. So because of this topology model and the tunnel model, they are complementary and frequently used together. So we want to share the same groupings and types. So for this time, we mostly work on those 3 groupings. Especially in our model, we use them for the underlay tunnels. And those 3 groupings will, I think, next presentation for the tunnel model presentation, Rakesh will talk more on those. Then about the generic bandwidth modeling, we used to have a generic string. So we got comments and so about this is too generic sometimes because we have the encoding inside the string. So the implementation has to passing that. And we also got this time suggestion from the northbound interface design team and also from, especially from Carlo and Sergio. So we will work this a little bit further. So now we have the improvement. We, instead of a single string, we change that to a grouping. So we have a structure, have this bandwidth modeled in further details to allow some well-known technologies have a more specific modeling so that you can see we covered a few cases here and then so it will be more clear and so that we can have more specific handling that we don't need to pass the generic string in those cases. Then we addressed the young doctors review comments. So we changed the presence container a little bit and also making them consistent with the TE tunnel model. We fixed a few terminology issues and we fixed some groupings a little bit. So major changes here is the NMDA style. We had a few discussions on that, and so we we consider some considerations. We want to move the document quickly, but we also want to have this the model has more usable and better consistent with others. So the NMDA guidelines, here is some summaries of that. So basically, we want to merge the, I don't want to go too much details here, and we have another session on Thursday. So for this, probably we talk a bit more on in that session. So we basically combine the state branch and the config branch into single branch, and then we remove the config state container and the state container, make one single tree to remove the duplications. So the changes, the guideline here, where here, so we need to have two modules this time. So then we see the changes here. We need to have the state module name here, but here everything here will be pretty much same. This is a trivial model, so can be implemented easily. It's just a simple use this grouping and reused. Then that will be it. We don't want to have the duplication. But then for our model, doing a change is not that simple. So we need to adjust our groupings, especially when we do the leaves. Whenever we have the XPath or leaf wraps, then those grouping will be broken. So we cannot share between the state model and the config model. So then we have readjusted the groupings and do some changes to the model. So eventually, we finished the NMDA changes. Thanks. We have dependency on the I2S generic topology model, and they have the base topology model has agreed to change to NMDA. Thanks to Alex, the changes have been completed, so that we can do our changes also. So we complete that changes, and so the most changes, like something like this, right? We have a container for the config state, and then we take them out, merge into one. Next step, we think we're pretty much done, and we are ready for the last call.
Can you go back a couple slides? I have a question.
Okay.
One more. So you talked about alignment with I2RS. Do you have any concerns remaining with alignment and fitting in with the I2RS topology model?
We are aligned now, so we're pretty much okay.
Okay, so there's
they have changed. So the last time in Chicago, initially the I2S model only contains a single tree, right, with the no state module. But now, after this NMDA discussion, they have agreed to add that also, so we can have something to augment. Then we are okay now.
Okay, so any other outstanding issues?
And we don't see any.
Okay. There's if I'm not mistaken, this model defines some types that are used by other TE models that are being developed, right?
That's right. We have between this model and especially the TE tunnels model, we share the same types, which is defined in other draft. So there's a module called the TE types.
So you have no types defined in this document that the other document's using? I thought Tunnel was using some of your types too.
We move those into the common TE types.
Okay. So you don't think there's any issues that would block this document moving forward at this point, both from a technical standpoint and also from a document referencing standpoint?
We have a few references. We referring to the one example to the TE tunnel model, and we also referring the young push, the notification, and we also referring the one draft we have for the scheduling in the night mode.
Okay, is that a informational
It
reference?
is informational, yeah.
Okay, so that's not a problem. Having an
Okay.
informational reference to another document's fine, and Yang push is proceeding along. In terms of the tunnel, do you think it makes sense to hold this document up until tunnel's ready? Or do you think you can progress and then just wait until the ref wait state?
We hope we don't want to wait. So.
Okay, so there's no reason to wait.
Yeah.
So going back to this question, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
If I could click the right button. You think the authors believe we're ready for last call?
Yeah.
All right, this is a pretty substantive piece of work, and there's certainly a huge amount of detail. It'd be good to find out how many folks have read this version. It came out just with the deadline. How many have read this version? Frankly, more than I expected, but it's still a few. How many have read any version? That's a really good number. I see someone's going to raise their hand anticipating what I'm going to say. How many think Igor should know? Normally I'd ask how many think, well, I'll ask, how many think the document is ready for last call? It's interesting that I think that's more than that said that they read the last version. This is, generally we think this is ready for last call as well, and would like to progress it as rapidly as possible, but given the size of the work and the size of the update, we think it's really important to give it a very good read. So even though Pavan is my co-chair, I'll talk to him about whether or not we do anything special here, maybe run an extended last call, give people time to deal with vacations that are going to follow the meeting. So either we'll have a last call that'll proceed in a few weeks, or we'll have an extended last call. Please start reading this document with the anticipation of it coming to last call. Thank you.
Okay, and also a few updates later enhancement to this model. So we also have a model for the layer 3 TE topology, not much changes. So this is just augmentation to the generic TE topology. We moved some packet-related pieces to this model. And so we also link this to the R3 topology model. So we also update this to NMDA. So that's a change. And this one is still individual draft. So we want to move this to work group adoption. There's another draft here.
Wait, let's take these one at a time because they're separate. So we're talking about this document. We've heard about this a couple of times, which is why we're getting just a brief update on changes, but this is an individual document. It's been out there for a while. The last time I believe we talked with the working group and folks generally agreed that this was function we wanted to cover, so we don't need to go there again. How many have read this document, and I mean any version of this document? It's also just a few, but again, an okay number. How many think that we should use this as the foundation for our work in this area? Remember that we had previously said we wanted to work in this area, so. I think it's about the same. It's enough to keep moving. So I think we should take this to the list and ask the whole working group formally if they would like to adopt. I don't know if he's coming to the mic or just moving chairs. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Then another one for SR and SR topology, SRTE here. This is also an augmentation to the two generic models. One is a layer 3 unicast topology, and we also link that to our TE topology. Combined together, make it both segment routing capable and TE capable. So it's also been updated to the NMDA style.
Okay, same questions, but a different document. I'd like to confirm that the working group thinks we should be working on this work, which is, as the title says, it's focused on Yang supporting TE using SR. How many think that that's an area we should be working in? I think this, anytime I ask a question, we're going to get the same number of hands, even though it's different people. So again, it's not a huge number, but also it's a reasonable number. How many have read this document? Any version? A little less, but how many think that this is a reasonable starting point for work in this area? Just a few. Does anyone have any reservations or anything they'd like to say before we say we're going to take it to the list for confirmation?
Daniele Ceccarelli, a late question because I just woke up. Suppose I'm a user of the topology. Why should I care suppose I sit on top of an SDN controller and an MS that is managing a network. What I receive is a topology. I thought I would use that T topology independently of the data plane. I mean, I don't care whether below there is RSPPT, segment routing, or whatever. I would expect it to receive the same type of topology. So why this differentiation?
Which one you're talking about, the packet or the SR? So anyway, so like the models in CCamp, right? So we have generic topology model, but for different technologies, you will have further details for that technology.
Okay,
so you
so
have
just to understand. So if I don't care about the type of data plane, the T topology is enough.
right.
If I want more details, so I want to be able to understand that below there is a segment routing data plane, I can get that information.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. So back to where we were on the polling, I think the conclusion is that this is a good foundation. And from the folks in the room, we have sufficient support, and that we'll take it to the list to get support of the working group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is the T tunnels Yang model. Tarek couldn't be here. His flight got cancelled. Rakesh will be filling in for him.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rakesh Gandhi, and I'm presenting the update on the TRSVP Yang model on behalf of the authors listed. The Tarek is running late. Hopefully, he's here sometime today. So, agenda is basically to provide an update since last IETF, discuss some open issues and next steps. So the first model is the TE tunnel model that we worked on. So basically, the summary of changes are as following. There is auto bandwidth properties. It moved to the TE MPLS module. Have added additional path constraints like tiebreaker and optimization criteria. There is a LSP upper state defined, and there is a state model for the computed path properties added, and also the in and out segments stitchings added. So many thanks to Sergio, Italo, Carlo, Francisco for their review, feedbacks, and attending meetings and discussing their feedbacks, and also the multi-vendor team who is meeting at least twice a week lately to make rapid progress on the model. So the path operational state, there is a computation aspects and there is a setting up aspects. So it gives the state as computation in progress or computation okay or it failed, or LSP setup is in progress, setup is okay, setup failed, setup the LSP is up. So there is a lot more details on the operational state now. For the path that's computed, there are additional properties defined. For example, what is the accumulated weight in terms of IGP or TE or latency or hop count of the path? What are the affinities on the path? What are all the SRLGs that this path is traversing? In addition to those properties, there is also the ERO type object defined for the computed path. So it looks very similar to ERO. There are a few refinements here as well in the object. There is seed hop is defined as well as there is a hop type. It could be streaked or loose. So it's been enhanced as well. So in terms of configuration aspects, there are additional constraints defined or reworked. So basically in this case, so there are three of them. So one is being the metric bound. So basically bound can be the maximum metric or latency or hop or and whatnot. And as mentioned, there is a hop type and hop defined for the ERO. So the other configs are there is optimization criteria. It's very similar to the one from RFC 5541. So it can be a one metric or list of metrics with a weight. And there is also tiebreakers. It's a list and it's an order list from top to bottom. So in case the two paths are the same, we have defined tiebreakers as well. So there is some enhancement to the resource affinity constraints. The usage includes the exclude any, include all as well now. So this is a new addition. It defines the stitching constraints, basically the in and out segment stitching for the LSPs. There is forward as well as reverse for the bidirectional segments. And the other two drafts, RSVP and RSVP-TE. So there is no change on the RSVP draft. And RSVP-TE mostly to comply to the dependent draft changes. So open issues, NMDA is a very popular topic this week. We definitely would be making the changes for the NMDA style. Some of the things we want to, or we are considering is the impact on the existing implementation. So if you have any implementation, please talk to us. We also need to understand the impact on the models that's augmenting. So we know that there is PCE, there is BFD, there is path computation, there is optical. So there will be definitely impact that we should discuss. We have for tunnels, there is a concept of auto tunnels, which can be created by PCE for FRR bypass tunnels and other like automates and whatnot. So definitely there is an issue for auto tunnels or dynamic states, if you will. So that's something we need to discuss. So next steps for us is we need to close on the NMDA approach. There is some work required for the tunnel RPCs. For the RSVP draft, that includes the base and extended, we haven't made changes for a while now. It's stable, so we do believe it's ready for the working group last call. And we do welcome your review and comments. Thank you. Igor?
Igor Bruskin, Huawei. I just wanted to make a comment. T-topology model and T-tunnel models are there. They have a lot of synergy, and they have a lot of common types and groupings, and they are so complementary that it might be presumed that they always must be used together, which would be a wrong conclusion. Basically, each model or each model family could be used separately. For example, a client may just use T-tunnel model and do everything it wants to do and address all use cases without any knowledge of topologies. And the opposite is also true. Basically, the topologies could be learned and configured, and all the provision could be done just based on T-topology model. So the point is that it would not be a good idea to hold, for example, T-topology model waiting for T-tunnel model and other way around.
Okay, thanks.
Igor, do you have any issue with the structure of the models, and particularly how the types are defined and the interdependencies between the modules?
Yeah, so we worked very hard to finalize this T-types model that Shufan mentioned, so that basically there would be no additional changes that would affect, for example, T-topology model that would be also needed in T-tunnel model. So we always work in tandem. So basically, pretty much the same group of people who works on T-topology model also works on T-tunnel model. So we do care a lot about these interdependencies and try to actually finalize before this meeting. So we do not have any issues at the moment.
Great, thank you. Did you switch to the slide to say something, or just?
Oh, this was, I think he was talking about the common groupings and stuff. So this is some of the common groupings that I think Zufan mentioned as well. So.
Okay, going back to your last slide.
Yeah.
So you have next steps here, which talk about sort of restructuring for NMDA, but you also say you're ready for last call. So
the RSVP model, it's been stable. So we do want to make changes for the NMDA, but having said that, the model itself.
Okay, so you have a planned update to become NMDA compliant, or whatever the right structured.
Yes, yeah.
And then after that is when you'd like to ask for last call.
Yes.
Okay, well, if you could let the working group know when you think you're ready, and then we can proceed from there. How many folks have read these documents? I'm asking them as a collection. I think there was 4 here. It's about the same number. Does anyone have reservations on these modules that they have not yet voiced on the list? Or have voiced on the list and want to discuss? We have Dieter coming into queue. All right. No, I don't know if it was because I hit the red button or someone, or how we lost Dieter. But if Dieter wants to talk, he should come back in. Dieter says he hit the wrong button. So we're still learning the best way to deal with Meet Echo. We'll give him a moment to come back in. Anyone else have any comments? I guess Dieter's gonna pass on coming back. Just ask him.
Hit the wrong button to get in.
Oh, he just wanted to support the moving it forward and that he thinks it's good. Okay, thank you, Dieter.
Thanks, Dieter.
That's the right button, right? So we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Young?
Forward, back, and light. Yeah.
Good morning. I am Young. I'd like to present IETF framework. There are many contributors and co-authors of this work, and hopefully we update what happened since last meeting. Yeah, this is update for this version 06. I think in terminology, we actually added network slicing terminology from IETF perspective. Actually, we used slicing terminology before 5G or 3GPP used slicing. So we try to clearly define what slicing means from IETF perspective. So we added that. I'm not going to go read the details, but just you can find out from the document. And CNC is a customer network controller. We actually defined in the text, but not in the terminology. So we made it clear. And likewise, MDSC, which is most important component of IETF. And also we clarify VN type, virtual network types, because of a lot of misunderstanding. So we had to clarify more clearly in the document. And also virtual network service, we use this term everywhere in the document, but we didn't have one section that defines what is virtual network service. So we clarify that. Virtual network service is requested by the customer and negotiated with the provider. And there are three types of VNS. First type of VNS refers to the VNS in which customer is allowed to create and operate a type 1 virtual network. What type 1 virtual network means is it's a virtual network that comprises a set of end-to-end tunnels from customer perspective. So there's no interaction with the topology or TE tunnel from that perspective. So customers just have their endpoint and then they request service like a BOD-like, but it's a set of end-to-end tunnels. And type 2 VNS is most interesting one, which refers to the service that operate based on type 2 VN, which type 2 VN is basically abstract topology. Customer can create based on pre-negotiated agreement with the operator, and then they can manipulate a virtual network topology as part of the service. And type 2A is a static topology they cannot change, and type 2B is the one that they can change dynamically. So type 2A, 2B are the same school. From Young model point of view, it's basically the same except for some policy. So to elaborate a little bit more, this is type 1 virtual network service and type 1 virtual network type. Basically, customer create their endpoint connectivity, and then it provides what are the VN members of that topology, and then what is QoS matrix and traffic matrix is for that VN, and also what is service policy they want to operate on. And type 2 VN is very interesting one, which now we integrate with T topology model, that customers still have a VN tunnel view, but in the middle they have a VN topology, which is basically abstract topology construct. We reuse a T topology model. And then our customer can also create tunnels over this virtual network topology, type 2. So it's a little bit more complex, and but there are some customers, they want to have this type of capability. So we added, we just clarified that this is a part of the scope. And also, the rest of the procedures are the same. And I think, last meeting, we had some question on how ACTN architecture maps with more generic architecture that is addressed in VN service young model that Adrian and Chinu, they developed, and they also use orchestrator terminology. So there's some issue with MDSC because MDSC is very techy terminology within this TIS working group. Not many people not familiar with what is MDSC. And so we had to kind of provide some kind of mapping between MDSC and then orchestrator. As you see here on the right side, MDSC has some components. Function 1 and function 2, they are service-related function, such as customer network mapping function and then virtual network service operation function that interface with the customer request and convert into a network related terminology. And then we have functions 3 and 4, which is a virtualization abstraction function and multi-domain coordination function. So those functions are actually, especially function 1, function 2, can be part of service orchestrator. But service orchestrator is not same as MDSC. They may have other functions, non-ACTN functions to perform, especially non-TE type of functions, service function, layer 3 mapping function, things like that. And the network orchestrator, we share with some functions 3 and 4, but network orchestrator may have non-ACTN functions as well. So we kind of added this diagram so that people can have a better picture. And even customer, what is customer? We have CNC, controller perspective, but there may be other functions that customer want to inject to the network. So we draw on CNC block. And likewise, PNC. PNC is a physical network controller, which is a component of domain controller. Domain controller may have other functions than PNC. So, and then we try to map our CMI is corresponds to customer service model, and then MPI is a network configuration model basically, and SBI is a service delivery model. So this is basically, we kind of expanded to explain to the readers who are not familiar with this TE terminologies and ACTN terminologies. And also, we added a new section, topology abstraction, which is basically import from other draft, directly TIS ACTN abstraction per working group comments. So we brought back black, gray, white topology terminology into the framework. And then I think one question was, would TIS ACTN abstraction have enough content to keep as a separate document? I think we still believe it's still like 12 to 13 pages of information there, which is sufficient information to be contained in the document. I think Daniele will present later on what's the status of that. We have other content that may stay there because bring that into a framework may be too overwhelming because we have a large pages already in the framework. So this is one resolution that we made. And then we put a couple of appendices to discuss advanced topic, like example of MDSC and PNC function integrated in service network orchestrator. Because a lot of implementation have MDSC function and PNC function in one box. So we try to explain that implementation can exist. And also IP and optical with layer 3 VPN service, how does architecture support and what kind of functional component fit into support that. So we kind of added as an appendix to further explain, better explain some of the scenarios. So summary, I think we believe that all pending issues and discussions are made through working group meetings in Chicago and also some other mails exchanged have been all resolved and updated in this OCS version. And I think one issue was network slicing. We had a BOF yesterday. So we want to make clear that all network slicing related work should not depend on this document. This document is ready to move ahead without being blocked by the discussion in network slicing. And once IETF has a stable definition of network slicing, we can return to that definition and then see how ACTN is applicable to that definition and determine whether more work is needed. And actually for that end, we actually, Daniel King in yesterday network slicing BOF presented how ACTN can be applicable to network slicing. So we have, we're going to address those additional topics if we need to on the separate document so that it does not stop this framework. So that's pretty much it. And I think I've been asking the working group last call for last 3 meetings, and I'm asking again.
So you waited this long, so let's wait a few more minutes. Let's go through the updates for the requirements and the abstraction methods, and then get back to the last call question for this document.
Okay.
Before we move off, how many people have read this this document? Again, that's actually not the same number. It's notably more. So that's great. Thank you. Right ones.
Okay. Good morning. I wanted to make just an update of requirement information model document.
Can you just step a little closer to the mic?
Okay.
That's the size of the font he put up. I can't make it any bigger. It's PDF.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I would just like to make you aware of update of requirement document information model. The requirement document is more or less stable from some time, but we get some feedback last time related to the need for clarification what requirement is referred to. So what is this type of requirement? Operator requirement, what? So we focus and reshape a little the document. And this document now is just focusing on operator requirement. Operator requirement that we split in 2 points. That is the service specific requirement that is more related to the service coordination function, so the virtual network service policy needed in the case of a CTN, and the network related operation, so the requirement related to the managing of multi-domain, multi-layer aspect of the CTN. And so we reshape the document and separate, and there is no more deleted or has been deleted all the part of the requirement related to the interface specific requirement. So we think that the document is stable from many time, that some clarification has been bring in the document. And so we think that is ready now for last call. For the information model, we make some work on cleanup on the document because there are a lot of overlapping with respect to the other CTM documents. And so we try to refer all the terminology and definition with only one document, that is the CTN framework document, that is the base referred document for any definition and terminology in the CTN, and delete all the overlapping that with other document specific for the framework. Then specific for the information model, we try to align with some aspect that we also touch with working with the tunnel model, and in particular we include in the virtual network service characteristic also the object function as in the tunnel, but in alternative with the metric and not in overlapping as was before. So also for this document, we think that the document is stable. There is all the information needed and managed in the context of CTN. And so we think that is ready to move for the working group last call.
Any questions? So we will come back to the question on last call for the requirements document after the abstract, after Daniele's presentation. For this, so the info model, do you want to tie the fate of this to the tunnel Yang model? Do you think you'll have to keep aligning it to how the data model pans out, or do you think it's stable enough? Do you foresee any changes to be made to the info model?
Maybe the other way around. Is there any reason to progress this document before we're ready on the tunnel model? Or should we just advance them together, keep them together?
Independent of the tunnel model, now it's stable.
Speak into the mic just so the remote can hear you.
I think that the document is stable independent of the fact of the tunnel model. We try to make some alignment in the sense that there is some mistake in the information model that we realize also working with the tunnel.
Is there any real benefit in pushing the info model independent of the Yang models? Or to me, it seems like it's good to keep them together just because if that way we make sure we're not out of sync in any way.
But which Yang model you're referring? Because
the ones that are derivative.
Sorry?
The ones that are related.
I think that the information model should be before the Yang model.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, one comment to reiterate what Sergio said. The info model is very high level, and we don't have that detailed specifics in regard to the tunnel model.
Sure.
So I think it should be ready to go.
Thank you.
Comment from Huawei, again, follow the comments from...
Just lean in a little, can't hear you.
Okay, following the comments from Sergio and Yang, I think the information model here is separate from the tunnel model, and we can do it respectively.
Okay. Well, Daniele is coming up. Don't walk over there. Looking back to the requirements document, how many have read this one? It's a good number. And how many, that was the requirements document, how many have read the info model? It's still a good number, but it's definitely less. On the info model, how many think that it's ready to progress, ready to last call? I'd say it's about the same number. Let's see the fate of the other documents, and Pavan and I will talk offline if it makes sense, if we think it makes sense to link or separate. What we heard from the authors is that the info model really can be progressed independent of any other document.
In any case, I would say that the order I would expect is requirements, framework, info model. So in any case, there is time for the info model.
Okay, thank you.
Or do you plan to have a different order?
We'll talk about the requirements and framework after your
Abstraction methods.
abstraction, right?
Procrastinators.
Let me get your slides up. Go. Clicker.
Morning. This is an overview of two other documents that are part of the ACTN set. In particular, the applicability of young models to the ACTN framework and requirements, and the various abstraction methods that can be used. Let's start from the applicability. What's the purpose of this draft? This is another draft that has been around for a while, and I believe it's pretty important because it's the one that explains how to use existing models to meet the ACTN requirements and to satisfy what is described in the framework, and provides an analysis of what is missing. I would say that when this work started, it was explaining what was missing, because in the meanwhile, we tried to fill the gap that was there. For example, the BN model, the telemetry model are examples of gap filling to meet the requirement. Short update. So again, this document says, hey, if you want to build a CMI, you need to have these models implemented. If you want to build the MPI, you need to have these models implemented. We tried to collect the set of functions that are needed against each different interface. And they are basically, when it comes to the CMI, we have the transport service request. And here you have a link to the reference to the related model. Then a virtual network. This is the great news in the CMI. Basically, you can request for a VN service. You can request for the instantiation, just for a path computation, or performance monitoring, telemetry, and so on and so forth. One more thing, if I correctly remember, this is an optional feature over the CMI, is topology abstraction. So whether you are sitting on top of the MPI or the CMI, you can ask for topology. Then we have the MPI. The MPI has a set of technology agnostic functions and a set of technology specific ones. The technology specific ones are mostly the work that is being done in CCAM regarding OTN specific augmentation to the topology and the T-tunnel, the WSON specific implementation, extensions, and so on. When it comes to the topology agnostic ones, we identified these functions. Scheduling, which is, one of the functionality you can ask for against the tunnels and topology, path computation, path provisioning, topology abstraction, and performance monitoring and telemetry. Summary. Again, hopefully this draft identifies all the young models already there that are needed to build the MPI and the CMI interface. The models that are referenced by this draft are pretty stable, pretty close to last call status, because, for example, the mandatory models for the MPI are the T topology, the T tunnel, maybe the one that is not yet advanced in the process is the path computation one, but it's just one of the functionalities. What else? I would say this is all. Do you want to take questions for this draft? No? Okay.
Questions on the draft? Maybe I should ask interest in the draft, but before we go there,
We start to be boring.
sorry. So this type of draft, this type of information is, we have typically done, but we've always done it as inside a framework where we talk about what's there, what's missing, and it's a snapshot in time, and we just include it in the framework. Is there any reason that this time you're doing it separately? Is it just that you didn't have the text when you wrote the framework, and then this is coming later, and you feel comfortable including it?
No, the point is that this is not just a gap analysis. This is a sort of guideline. I mean, you want, we discussed a lot whether this needed to be a standard track document or an informational document, because this mandates what you need to implement to build the MPI and the CMI. So from a given point of view, this could be a standard track document. But we decided to describe it as an applicability. This is the main reason for the decision. And the reason why it's a separate document is not just a gap analysis.
Now that you've decided not to make it a standard track, why not bring it in? You know, I'm thinking back to like the TP control plane document that I did in this group. We included exactly the same type of information.
Do you want again a 300 pages framework?
Does it, is it better to run the process in a longer document, or is it better to have 2 documents? Okay, so this is, well, we have a comment on the floor.
Yeah, Harvey. Personally, I would like to say that if we refer to the ACTN framework document, I assume it should be a self-contained document, and currently I think the shape is complete. And this draft is mainly focused on a kind of applicability analysis on the IETF Young models to the ACTN architecture. And I think we do not need to enumerate every possibility on applicability in the framework draft. That is not fair for some potential approach or solutions. So I would like to say we do this separately, and we can follow the progress of the framework draft. And after that, the framework draft is proceed, we can double check whether this applicability analysis draft is consistent with what we have in both ACTN side and IETF Young model side.
Thank you.
I think I agree with Hao-Mian's analysis, because framework is technology independent, and be aware that in PCE we have applicability of ACTN to PCE. So we need to separate applicability of Young from framework as well, because we don't want to tie implementation protocol and data model or from this framework, because there are different ways to implement. So I just echo with that.
Okay. Moreover, even if this is an applicability, in the end, is the solution to the problem identified by the framework. And having the solution together with the problem could be.
Well, we've done that in the past to scope it, so to narrow the scope of the work. Do you think this document will be, should wait for the progression of some of the other work, some of the documents it's referring to, maybe some new documents that might show up? Or would you like to see it progress and then be a little out of date? Should be a snapshot in time.
So progress as a working group, make it a working group document is something that, in my opinion, could be done without any dependencies.
I'm actually I'm jumping ahead, because if we're going to end up holding it up because to wait for other documents, if we had combined it, it would unnecessarily hold up the framework, and we don't want to do that.
No.
So if this was going to be gated by other documents, it would strengthen the argument for keeping it a separate document. If it's not going to be, then it just doesn't matter. It's not a relevant point.
I would say that since this is it's an informational document, and it's pointing at mandatory functionalities and optional functionalities, I would say, personally, I would wait for the mandatory functionalities to be approved
And
before
that-
progressing the document.
And so that would certainly strengthen the argument for keeping it separate.
Yes, definitely.
Justin, sir. So the way it's written, it should stay informational. It's definitely not standard track document in the way it's worded. So
Right,
keep it-
standard struck is off the table, I think we all agree.
Yeah, so number two, it's written a bit like a wishful thinking. It doesn't exactly describe interaction between different models and how they work. So I think there's additional work required to make it really useful for people who are going to implement it. It's not just you need this number of models, you also need to describe how they interact with each other.
Good point.
Yeah. So I think it's good to get the preference of the working group or those in the room of whether they prefer bringing this into the framework or keeping it separate as the authors recommend. So we're going to ask the two questions. How many folks think it makes sense to roll this document into the framework? And keep in mind the comments both Daniele and Young made. How many think it's good to roll it in? 0. I don't think I even need to ask the other question because 0 loses. So keeping it separate sounds like the way to go. How many people think that so right now this is a individual document and we're going to ask a question about taking it into a working group document. How many think that this type of function or this type of document is good for the working group to produce? It's a reasonable number, but it's a small number. So either people are not interested in the topic or they're sleeping. How many have read this document? It's about the same, maybe a little more. How many think it's a good foundation for the working group? The same. So I think this is a good thing to take to the list for confirmation to bring in as a working group document. Thank you. So you have another part.
I have another one.
And you have about 10 minutes.
I need less. This is sure.
We have discussion.
Okay, this is probably even shorter. So we had a similar discussion about the ACTN abstraction methods. And we were, in the end, we decided to have some text from the draft into the framework. Just to recap, what is described in the abstraction method? All the different ways in which the topology can be presented from the PNC to the MDSC over the MPI, and on top of the MDSC to the customer. We identified the black, gray, white approaches, namely the ones with no or very little information regarding the topology, to the other extreme, which is white, which is the full detail on the topology, and then all the different shades of gray in between. So we moved the basic definitions to the framework. Then the open point. Should we move the remaining part of the text to the document, or should we keep this draft standalone? The authors believe that there is still enough meat to keep this document as a standalone document, because it still describes abstraction factors in the ICTN architecture. It describes in details all the different methods that can be used to build a gray topology, because that's a little bit more complex than just simply gray or simply black or simply white. And it also defined protocol and data model requirements. So these are the reasons why the authors believe that there is enough meat to keep this document as a standalone document. But this is obviously a good topic for the next discussion. Summary and next steps. This is the next step slide that we presented at the last meeting in Chicago. Actually, we were super happy about the feedback that we got from the presentation, because a lot of people thought that there was a lot of confusion on the different types of topology, the different ways that topology can be presented over the different ACTN interfaces. Homework is done. We wrote this document. We have a lot of text. The draft is stable, and again, depending on the discussion, we believe this is another good document for progressing the ACTN work.
Can you go back to the slide that talks about, yeah, this one. So in the last meeting, we asked if you could roll this into the adopted documents, and I guess the response now is that you wouldn't want to do that. You still want to keep this going separately. Do you want to pull
up? It'd be good to go into why there's value into keeping it separate, because when we read it, we think that it's important to read this document just as much as reading the framework and requirements, and you have to decide which part goes where, but basically it's almost that the framework and requirements don't stand alone. They need this document.
Actually, in order to read and understand the framework, you need to know what black, white, and gray topology mean, and that's why we imported it to text, but you don't need to go into the details of the entire process and so on. So, I mean, it's a suggestion. If you think that it's you can't read the framework without this, we can move.
It seems it fills a necessary gap, and it becomes an unnecessary dependency that we could just take the material. The last time we talked about it, it seemed that the working group agreed that this was good material. We can ask the room if they change their mind, but I don't think we want to. Well, if anyone has objections to the current text, they should come to the mic. So we're going with the presumption that the working group still believes this is good material. And it just seems that it would be natural to incorporate it fully into, some of it goes to the requirements, some goes to the framework. But it seems it would be natural to bring it in fully into those documents, so there's not another dependency to go understand the problem space.
I personally don't have strong objections. I wouldn't overload the framework, but I don't think that this text would slow the framework down, right?
I don't think so either. I mean, I think it's should be a pretty mechanical thing to bring it in. It'd be good to hear from the working group if anyone has any views on this, agrees, disagrees. Particularly, my bet is that some of the other authors may want to chime in, maybe not.
And suddenly the framework goes from 300 pages to 500.
Look, it's better to have one place to go look at it than say, okay, I read this much, now I have to remember it, and when this other document has to repeat parts. I mean, that's a big problem. We like the last one has some repeating stuff we'll still have to reduce, but it just makes it harder for people.
No, I mean, again, I strongly prefer to have the applicability as a separate document. Regarding this one,
yeah, we've already
dealt with the other
reference.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Young. I think this, whatever the remaining content, is actually quite advanced material that the reader of the framework would not need to know, actually, because topology is just topology, gray or black or white, and then we have T-topology model that explains well. So, but this one is kind of building on top of that in case topology abstraction is not good enough for the MDS to operate. They want to get additional information through request and reply type of thing. So this is quite advanced material from my perspective and co-author's perspective. So that's why this might digress a topic if we were to combine into the framework. So, but that's my perspective to your question.
Yeah. So for part of the document, like section 2, abstraction factors, that's abstraction. It's in the name of ACTN. That seems pretty basic. And that, to me, that one was more compelling or less of a gray area whether to move it or not. The other parts about building gray topology, I can see sort of an argument for keeping that separate, but I still think it's helpful to just bring it into one place, and if you're not interested, you skip over it rather than have to go find it in another document and potentially miss it.
Okay.
But that's my view. Let's see what other folks think. I don't mean to cut you off. If you wanted to say something else, please go ahead. Young.
I think the framework draft current version already addressed what is abstraction and what is basic terminology is required in the scenario. And for the abstraction method, the draft it just indicate how different kind of approaches can be used to do the abstraction. And I think that's a different dimension compared on the framework draft. And there may be some potential future techniques or other kind of related technologies, but I would like to see my suggestion is to move the framework draft first, and after that becomes stable and every corresponding techniques can look to that framework as a reference, and we can make sure we are doing the correct direction. That is my point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name is Michael Scherf. I'm mainly speaking here for teacher who doesn't want to risk the button once again, but it's also my own impression. I think we have quite a number of different documents here, and there's a risk of inconsistencies. So if there's a way of reducing the number of documents, that wouldn't do harm, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. How many would object to merging this document into the as appropriate the framework and requirements documents? You split it as you see it. No, I'm sorry. No. But you distribute the document to existing working group documents as the authors see fit. So how many think that how many object to absorbing this document into existing working group documents? Any objections to that? Young, you at least should raise your hand. So we had no one raise their hand, but Young is going to come to the mic.
Yeah, I think whether this is part of go-to framework or not, I think we should, if we were to combine this one to framework, okay, and then people understood this is good content already, right?
Yeah.
And I don't want to the process being delayed again for the last call for framework. And if we were to move, this one will be abstraction method and then subsections, right? If we were to do that, would a working group can proceed for working group last call for framework? Because we don't want to hold that any further because it has been a while. And I just want to ask our working group chair, we can upload this one right away this week, and then without changing content, just cut and paste. And if we do that, if you were to do that, would the working group chairs can still call for last call because people already read this draft, right? And what is your position? You don't want to delay another meeting till like November because of that's not desirable at this moment.
My position is that it would be best to produce the best document that the working group can. Mm-hmm. And if that's by doing a simple cut and paste, great, but I would think that it would produce a better document to do a real integration of the text. And when the document's ready, we will last call it. We will not last call it before we in the working group think it's ready. So I'm not going to make any promises. Yes. I'm going to say that this will produce a better document.
I mean,
I don't want to get into a semantic argument of saying, sure, it's a good idea, and meaning that it's a good idea in principle, because I do think it's a good idea in principle, but you come back and say, I refuse to make any changes until we were last call. So I'm not sure where you're going with this. I think it's a good idea to bring it in. If the document's going to be ready at that point and the working group agrees, we'll last call it.
Right.
But I think you should do something intelligent. I don't think you should just do a simple drop-in because that gets a verbal agreement to move the document immediately, and that makes you through a gate. We're trying to produce good quality. So do what's right to produce
Yeah,
good
good
quality.
quality
and we'll
means
move-
this
we'll be
document itself is a good quality, people agreed on that, and we're not changing the content, just basically import. We are willing to import if, we want to.
I think it's getting a little
Guaranteed.
hypothetical. Let's produce a good document
Okay.
and then we'll have something definitive. And, I think in principle, we're all in agreement, but we
Yeah.
just got a bunch of people at the mic. So let's hear from them and then try to wrap up the discussion.
Yes, Lou, I have some doubts on answering your question because I agree with the statements that have been said before that folding this information into the framework, looks to me a little bit too much from a framework. It's a very enhanced features, and I think it's not good to put in the framework because framework should give me the frame, and we should stabilize that. So to do more work on top of it. Folding in other documents, I don't see any other documents in the current working group documents where this material can be moved. So it's difficult for me to answer. I'm not, it's okay not to have a dedicated document, but I don't see any other documents where this material can fit. So at this moment, I would prefer to keep the current document and see whether new advanced features for ACTN come up so we can try to combine them, because I think advanced features in the framework is a little bit too overloading the document. Thank you.
Okay, you see that potentially there could be some new material that goes into this draft, but you don't want.
If we found a new advanced material that we needed to document in the context of ACTN, we can put this material and the new material into a new draft, because this to me is too much advanced. It's very useful information, but it's much more advanced than what you need in a framework document.
So, Lou Anderson, I did not raise my hand. I was very close to doing that. The reason I didn't do it is that I don't really see the implications. It's too much information kind of scattered out in a number of documents that if you actually are going to submerge it into those other documents, I don't see the implication, and I think this discussion is almost impossible to have in this kind of fora. So, yeah, if it's reasonable, submerge it into it. If it's reasonable to have it separate, give us a separate document. But I think you need to take that discussion a little bit more educated than just a question in an open meeting.
So I'm in favor of merging, given the content, it definitely belongs in framework. However, I'm against copy and pasting it. I think the detail could go into appendix while the use cases should be subsection within framework.
I'm going to say something that the other authors could kill me. Probably the old test could go to an appendix.
So how about this? How about, since you're interested in trying to make it work, take a pass at it. Either publish it, if you guys like it, publish it as a new rev. If you don't like it, publish it put it up on Git and send it to the working group and say, here's what it would look like. What are the opinions of the working group? And we can have a more, as Loa was talking about, more thoughtful discussion in specific context. It's always tough to have hypotheticals. So if you actually take a pass at it and say, hey, you know what, it didn't work, I failed, then we can say, yeah, we think you're wrong, or we can say, okay, and if you have something that looks good, maybe the other authors will say, yeah, this is okay. So if you were willing to do that, that would be great.
Extra work.
But it moves the ball forward. So thank you.
We have a remote presenter next. Dhruv, are you on?
I know he was ready and we went a little over there. Dhruv, can you get into queue, please?
Dhruv?
Young, would you mind? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Young again. On behalf of Drup, I present data models for HTTP VN service operation. I think, this one, I think I elaborated in the framework. We added virtual network service, and this basically fulfills CMI, customer to MDS interface. And this is basically aligned to customer service model. And this is actually, CMI is a business boundary between customer and network provider. So VN-Yang model, we have access point concept and virtual network access point to describe customer interfaces. And VN is the umbrella term, and VN has VN members in it, because we are talking about VN as a set of end-to-end tunnels or end-to-end tunnels plus some virtual network topology within for type 2. And then VN-Yang model basically express constraints, service constraints, and the service policy. Update from the last version basically aligned to HTTP framework. We clearly defines VN types and VNS types referring to the framework, and align with information model, and added justification section why this is needed. And then this Yang model is NMDA compliant. I think this is a repetition of the slide I presented, but let me do it once more. VN type 1 is customer defines a VN, and a list of VN members that constitute the VN, and with QoS and SLA and metric policy parameters for the VN. So this is a customer driven type. And type 2, same as type 1 plus, not just a customer want to operate end-to-end tunnel level, but it wants to operate on the virtual network topology level for advanced customers. And they want to utilize some virtual network topology capability and tunnel capability. And type 2A is one set, the topology is to stay with the same, but if you want to change, that's type 2 dynamic. So I think I elaborate this in the framework, so this is basically type 1. And type 2, as you see here, is a little bit more complex. It's not just endpoint tunnel view, but end-to-end tunnel view has a topology inside it. So they can manipulate some kind of traffic steering or load balancing across this virtual topology. We are reusing a T-topology model that Xu Feng and Igor and company worked on. And then we can create tunnel on top of this virtual network topology from a VN member perspective. They want to shift the traffic from one location to another. This is done that way. So justification, why need VN type 1? Because most customers doesn't want to get involved details of the topology. So this is a very justified. And then, so we also have a VN compute module. And then we have a multi-source, multi-destination idea, because multi-source, multi-destination means customer give a set of potential sources and a set of potential destination. It doesn't determine tunnels yet, but depending on the network condition, it chooses. And then customer can inject a policy to the operator. Please choose one of the sets defined in multi-source and multi-destination. So this type of model is very important for like transporting some important compute data or storage data, which is outside of ACTM, but still customer can give a preference based on network conditions. So network can inject what's the best for the customer tunnel. And other thing is that we have a mapping of VN to services, layer 3 SM and layer 2 SM, which is very important because into somewhat tied to that. And also we have telemetry, performance monitoring, and auto scaling intent configuration method for the VN and also for tunnel. So I think I kind of elaborate all these features here. And this is VN-Yang model. as you see here, we have access point definition and the list of virtual network access point inside of each access point. And we also reference to T topology reference so that whenever T topology update, we can, this model will operate on that so that it can set up the path, if you will, configure abstract path, and then it handles multi-source and multi-destination with other service policies that listed down bottom. So the summary, I think this is aligned very closely to the philosophy of customer service model, and it works well with other ACTN and other related Yang models, T topology and T tunnel. And then we ask for working group adoption for this work.
Okay. Drew, are you there? I see your picture was there for a moment and then you disappeared, but you're at the mic.
Yes,
I'm
I'm
able
here.
to say something?
Testing.
Oh, great. So, yeah, you sound great. So you're here for questions, so perfect timing. We have someone at the mic.
Yeah, my name is Michael. So on the VNS type 1, I'm really wondering, is there need to model this exactly in the same Yang model like the VNS type 2? Because from a customer perspective, the usage of VNS1 and VNS2 seems to be pretty different. So I'm wondering, does this really have to be in one Yang module, first of all?
So your question is, should it be in one model?
Yeah, is there really a need for the VNS1 to be in the same Yang model for VNS2? Because the customer uses these two models, at least in my understanding, in a very different way.
Yes. Yeah, I think Drew might have a question, but every Yang container is optional. So you don't have to implement type 2.
Yeah, I think Drew wants to speak.
If I may try to answer this question. So if you look at the Yang model in itself, right now you will see that the only difference between the type 1 and type 2 is we have a reference to the abstract T topology. So irrespective of which way you are using, the Yang model constructs are the same. You have the access point, you have the VN AP, and you have what are the requirements. In case of VN type 2, you have an extra mechanism that you can also refer to the abstract T topology draft. So I kind of agree with you that at the higher level, it looks like there are two different things. So maybe we should model them differently. But when it actually comes to writing the Yang model, they kind of look almost similar. So if you look at the Yang model, you'll get what I'm trying to say here.
There's a background of my question, because if for the VNS1, I mean, the added value of that Yang module compared to just a list of tunnels is relatively low. So I'm really wondering if we really need just another list of tunnels in that Yang model, because to me that's actually for VNS1 what this model does. And it's just yet another list of things. And do we really need a Yang module for a list? This is really not exactly clear to me, because it's, and a lot of the things that the draft mentions as a motivation for that list, you can definitely do this in other ways. So applying policy to more than one tunnel, for example, this is something that's easy to do. You don't need a Yang module for that. Doing path computation on more than one tunnel or with constraints between the tunnels, it's again something you can do. Having a common identifier for multiple tunnels, this is all things you can do in software. This is not rocket science. So it's really the question, do you really need a Yang module for that?
Yes.
Yang, go ahead.
Drew, go ahead.
Yeah. So if you read our justification, I think the main justification, you are right that at the higher level, it does look like that we are just grouping a bunch of T tunnels together. But the main question is, as a customer, what is the best way for me to tell you my requirements to the service provider? And if I am thinking in terms of a virtual network, our VN info model, our VN framework, everything talks in terms of a VN. Wouldn't it be better for us to, even in the Yang, to use the same terminology, same construct? So that is one of the key reasons. And the same reasons hold good for any service Yang. You could try to set up an L2 VPN also by talking in terms of VRF, but we don't do that. We write a service model which simplifies things. So I feel that this still holds for our VN Yang model.
Yes, as I said, from a software implementer perspective, the added value this list that you add here, and adding one identifier to a list, I mean, this is a relatively moderate benefit compared to just using the list, and the list I think we already have. Okay.
Igor Briskin. I think I agree with Michael. I think just having like a list of tunnels, it doesn't produce any more value, and it doesn't tell, for example, to the customer how exactly can I use these tunnels. For example, what kind of adaptation capabilities, what kind of payload I can actually put on these tunnels. And so this is what topologies are for, right? So when we have, for example, in the T topology model, we have a way to say that basically those tunnels could be used in this way because they can adopt sort of those clients, and basically this is so much bandwidth that is still available for adaptation and so forth. Just having connectivity between two sites doesn't tell me how can I use tunnels, right? Okay, basically topology, which is, in my opinion, is nothing different from virtual network, would be sufficient.
Yeah, I think that's why we differentiate type 1 and type 2, and you're referring to type 2. We agree with that, but many customers don't need that complexity. They just want to operate a set of tunnels together in a correlated way. And I don't think T-tunnel model provides that mechanics and the parameters for service policy aspect.
So what I was trying to say is that, say, I have a set of OTN tunnels, okay? So how can I use these tunnels? Can I carry Ethernet traffic on them? Or can I use, say, STM traffic? How the user can use them?
I'm sorry to cut off an interesting discussion. I actually would really like to continue this and have some additional points I'd like to add, but we're already 10 minutes over. So please discuss this more on the list. And let's not wait until the next meeting to discuss this draft. Let's take it up on the list. So Drew, if you have enough points to respond to, start the discussion by responding to those, and maybe that'll help be a catalyst for more discussion.
Okay.
So let's move on to your next presentation. And I'm sorry we ran a little over there. So if you can speed this one up a little, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'll do that. So this is the T and service mapping Yang model. We have a 0.1 version. The 0.0 was discussed in the last IETF. Next slide, please. So a quick introduction. This Yang model tries to map the services like L3SM, L2SM with the traffic engineering tunnels that are used. So either to the T tunnel model as well as to the VN model. We also try to specify basically when you set up a service, what is your requirement with respect to T tunnel? Are you okay with just picking up whichever T tunnels are available? That is, let the P routers and the ASBR routers pick whichever tunnel is available, or you would like to make sure that we set up a new tunnel and that tunnel is only used by a particular service, perhaps like a network slicing way. So this kind of requirement can be easily set via this mapping model, and the VN and the L3SM model, which are two separate Yang model and can exist separately. This is the Yang model that brings them together and say this L3SM service use this set of VNs and these set T tunnel. This is consistent to the MDSC framework as well, and you would see that the new framework update has an appendix which talks about how L3 VPN can be set up and what is the relationship with the ACTN VN. We also clarified that the scope of this mapping model is similar to the scope of L3SM. That is, in this case, the L3SM is for a single service provider. So here also, this mapping is within one service provider network. Next slide, please. This slide shows sample flow and imagine that the case is that when you set up an L3 VPN service, you also would like a new set of TE tunnels to be created based on the QoS requirements and bind it to a particular particular VPN. In this case, the sample flow would look like this, that the customer may only talk in terms of L3SM, and the MDSC internally may create the VN required for this VPN to set up, also pass on necessary requirement to the PNC down to the devices, and make sure that the VRF instances that are created are binded to the tunnels of this particular VN. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we also updated in the text that yes, there can be multiple modes and multiple ways this can be done. It could be simply a selection of an existing tunnel, binding of a new tunnel created, as well as a case where the operator allows to use an existing tunnel but change its bandwidth or its properties. Some may allow the changes only in the IP layer and no changes in the optical. Other may allow changes in both. So since there are multiple modes and policies, this Yang model can also take care of that. And this model can also take care of, I have shut the webcam so that my audio goes through. That's what the Meet Echo told me. So that's why you're not seeing the video. I'll continue. So this model also has the ways to say, oh, you can create new VNs and tunnels, but try to keep changes only in the IP MPLS layer, or you can also change in the optical. So this has been now added into the document. Next slide. This slide shows the relationship that, as we know, that there can be multiple services. So we'll have services on the left-hand side, and you could either talk in terms of VN or in terms of TE tunnels. So those are things on the right-hand side. And this mapping model is the one that maintains the relationship between the two. Next slide. So this is the Yang model. The Yang model perhaps has not changed too much. All we have done is created multiple map types. So the relationship remains the same, that you have a list of mappings. On the left-hand side, you refer to either the L2SM or the L3SM model. And on the right-hand side, you refer to either a VN or a list of TE tunnels. We also try to map the access point. Since in TE, we have AP and VN AP. Similarly, in the L3SM and L2SM models, they have site IDs. So it's important to map the two. So that mapping is also maintained in this model. Next slide. So we will continue to enhance the model and work on it. And this I feel is a very important part of ACTN, because we need to clarify that once we have created tunnels or we have this VN, how this VN is actually going to be used. And that's for these services. And if we do not have a mechanism in a Yang model that brings the two together, I think we have a big missing piece. So that is that piece that this model is trying to handle. That is, know that we have created these VNs for what purposes, and we have that list clearly. So when we are monitoring a service, we have an easy way to figure it out, which are the set of tunnels, and then we can do telemetry, performance, and all the other things by having this mapping. Thank you. I'm done. Questions?
And just to be sure we understand, this module is dependent on the prior module, correct?
Can you repeat?
This module has a dependency on the module defined in the prior document.
Yes, it
the VN.
does. Yes, it does.
I just wanted to make sure it's clear. Let's do the two questions, and then we'll have to go to the list.
Yeah, my name is Michael. I think I understand what you're trying to achieve here, but I wonder if you have really looked at the L3SM model in RC 1849, because I mean that model is a relatively complex model, and you just map it to a site here. Sites can be multi-homed, and there are other layer 3 VPN constructs, such as cloud access, for example, in that model. So there are a lot of things what the L3SM model allows, and it's impossible for me to see how the mapping would work here. So I think this might work for the very basic case, but the L3SM model allows a lot of other ways to set up a layer 3 VPN. And literally speaking, I don't see how you would do the mapping here in those cases. Also, multi-homing is one typical example where I don't see how it would work here.
Okay, I can add those.
I actually sort
of. It's there in our mind.
Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, it's there in our mind. I agree with this comment. I will add more text to clarify that.
That'd be great. And also feel free to discuss on the list. Likewise, I was trying to understand how if we just want to add TE to the L3 and an L3 service model, why it has to be specific to how the L3 is supported underneath. Does it really need to know, beyond making a TE service request, do you really have to have any knowledge of how it's being supported internally? Like, why is it tied to ACTN specifically? If we wanted to have a fully distributed control plane, why would you care? I don't understand that. So that would be good to get in the draft also.
Okay.
Last question.
So it's completely missing the feedback. There's no notification given its service request and mapping. I think we really need to look into how to make it useful for provisioning and real mapping.
So you're saying you need reverse feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think that's a part of the model, because I think the next slide, which is about the telemetry, can give, that's the feedback. So once we know this is the L3SM model, it uses this particular VN. Now you can do telemetry on this particular VN to get the feedback, and the service provider knows that everything is going fine within the network via the VN. So that was one of our main reasons to do that. But I agree that we will add these texts. These are very good suggestions. Thank you.
Before I present this, Lou, your question on whether layer 3 service mapping dependent on VNYang, actually it's a case. We don't have to depend on VNYang. We can have a tunnel mapping directly. So I think, Drew, you missed the question that Lou asked. We don't have complete dependency
we can take
on...
it to the list. I mean, even though it's my question, I think we still should take it to the list.
Yeah, we can elaborate that. Okay. This is Young Lee again. I think I have a presentation this morning. This is about telemetry for performance monitoring. So we are kind of capturing only key performance index telemetry, basically, which is non-technology dependent, like latency and utilization percentage and so on for T tunnels or ACTN VNs. So this is a strict implementation from requirement 7 in ACTN requirement document, which is based on the use case provided here. I think one important thing is that customer wants to create the telemetry, the performance they are interested in, so that they will be able to subscribe and monitor using Yang push mechanism in this case. And also, one of the important things is that they want to be able to adapt to that performance, the telemetry. That's a static one that they get bombarded, but they want to be able to tell the networks in case something happened, please do so. And also, scalability of performance data is one of the requirements. Customer doesn't want to get bombarded with millions or millions of data in many cases. They want to have very aggregated and just abstracted telemetry. So this draft support for telemetry subscription mechanism driven by the customer, and then it has a scaling intent. In and out intent can be also subscribed to. So as you see here, we have a CNC and MDSC and TNC. CNC basically subscribe. I want to have, say, delay and the bandwidth utilization of my tunnel. It can actually, it can also add other data. And we also allow group operation, for instance, for the link utilization, maximum of each link would be the right representation for end-to-end tunnel. So you specify max operation for bandwidth utilization, but for delay maybe end operation, because you have multiple links involved for end-to-end tunnel. So you have to put end operation for that telemetry. So you basically allow customer basically subscribe to this end-to-end tunnel to be monitored on those statistics. And then MDSC basically translate that into per domain equivalence. It's a little bit more detailed because now each PNC has to operate on LSP level. So PNC has to monitor on the link level for that LSP. And then basically PNC report, it's a per LSP telemetry to the MDSC. But MDSC has also end-to-end tunnel, so it has to create end-to-end concatenation of that tunnel for delay and bandwidth utilization and so on, and then report back to CNC on the level that CNC can understand on the end-to-end tunnel level or virtual network level. So this is the basic idea. And then we have two modules here. One module is basically T KPI telemetry that augments T tunnel. And then the other one is ACTN T telemetry augments ACTN VN. So if you don't want to operate ACTN VN, then you just operate T tunnel level telemetry. So as I said, both use Yang push mechanism for subscription and the monitoring condition setup. And we also have some auto scaling by configuring condition when to scale in and when to scale out, depending on the telemetry data.
I think you're over. You've gone over your 5 minutes. So
Okay. Yeah, so basically, last comment was packet loss. It's a technology specific, so we took it out. So now this is a completely technology agnostic model from customer standpoint. And then this is NMDA compliance for ACTN parts, but the T KPI telemetry still depends on T tunnel model. So we need to still work on the changes in T tunnel model to be completely NMDA compliant. So these are the models. I don't have time to go over. Please take a look. And then continue to enhance the model and be aligned with T tunnel model. And we believe that this is a good base for working group adoption.
Yeah, it seems that we should continue this with the other two documents. There seem to be all linked, right?
No, I said
this is not based on the VN.
We have two modules. One is
Mike.
Yeah, we have two modules. That module has nothing to do with ACTN VN. This is a T tunnel level, and this is a VN. VN is another higher layer that has set of tunnels.
So we should take it to the list, but a good discussion point, and either Pavan or I will make it, is why not just move the part on the TE tunnel into the base TE, and just look at it as missing functionality, and just get it in there. And
Okay, yeah, we'll continue to discuss on the list.
Okay, thanks.
Igor?
We have an hour forward, back, like. And if you can go a little quick, that'd be great.
Yeah, good morning. I have two presentations, and I actually would like to borrow some time from this presentation to my second presentation, so I will go real quick with this one. The purpose of this document, basically, as we just discussed and concluded, that T topology model and T tunnel model, they rapidly approach or already at the stage of the last call, and this is a very good news. What is somewhat worrisome is that we hear from implementers that the models are too complex and convoluted, and it's difficult to implement on both client and server side. Operators complain that it is very difficult to even understand. The models sound like very rich and powerful, but it's difficult to understand how and what kind of use cases they can solve based on these models, what kind of interfaces they can use, and how does it all this thing fits into the SDN architecture. So we felt like to do some promotional work, kind of evangelist effort, and we wanted to abstract from the complexities of Yang and the Yang architecture, all this NMDA architecture and stuff like that, and concentrate purely on the constructs, attributes, relationships, and semantics, basically, in general, of both models. Okay, so we wanted to provide the author's view of the definitions of the constructs and the parts that comprise the models, the relationships, and our view how these models could be applied to solve various use cases. Okay, so it has three parts: T topology, modeling, T tunnel modeling, and use cases. And basically, let's start with the T topology modeling. So basically, you see that this is the general view of T topology, and T topology could be defined as a graphical traffic engineering, a representation of the resources of a particular network domain. It has, the model has four parts, four basically basic stones on which it's based. It's a node, it's a link termination point, and tunnel termination point. Okay, so the node, basically, it's
I think most of the content in this deck is self-explanatory, so maybe you could jump to the summary and then...
So basically, I just encourage to go through this presentation and to look into both this presentation and the manual that we produced. And at this point, we want to solicit feedbacks, right? And we are not in any hurry. I think that's a right time to start this document because we want to follow up the progress of the two documents. That's it. Basically, I can go to that presentation.
So, well, let's finish this one. Yep. This seems like very good, useful, sort of informative text. The question is, is the working group interested in this? So this helps explain how to use the TE Yang models that we're developing, which, as we talked about, are pretty complex. It's just helpful text. How many think that this type of document is useful? Reasonable, a good number. How many have read the document? About the same. How many think that we should bring this into the working group? About the same, actually a little less. So I'd like to bring this to the list and get confirmation from the list that we should bring it into the working group. Thank you. Right. So you have less than, is this, no, that's the wrong thing, sorry. Igor, stop clicking.
I will.
Okay.
All right. So, as I mentioned, there's a lot of, there are some complaints about the complexity of the models, and there is some confusion even among the IETF folks. So for example, we heard in the network slicing gap analysis, we heard that the reason why we need a special working group for network slicing is because, for example, there is no relationship between the underlay and overlay topologies and stuff like that, which is totally untrue. But there are also one thing that they mentioned, that the TS models today, they do not include any knowledge of network function, software function. And with this, we actually agree. We started to think about this work some 6 months ago. We started with Shufen, and then quite a few people joined, including Daniele and Joel Halpern, Martin Wiesers, and James Gallard, and other guys. who actually were very excited about this work. And we think that this is something that we can do. It fits very well into ACTN architecture, and I think it would be perfect for network slicing. Okay, so again, this is a network topology, and the abstraction of this network topology could be presented to a client. So a client then now have a say how the services, like a connectivity services, could be set up on a network, and in terms of bandwidth utilization and fade sharing, protection, stuff like that. Right, but the problem is that what if the network also offers not just connectivity service, but various service functions. And as of today, the client has no clue what service functions are available to the client, how they are, where they sit in the network, how they could be connected, what kind of limitations that could be used, and so forth. So the service-aware network topology would look like that, basically. We have nodes, we have topology, it could be T topology, it could be reachability topology, and then we have like a set of various network functions hosted by some or all of the nodes. And we assume that there will be certain information as to how the service functions could be changed together inside one node, how they could be connected to the nodes link and tunnel termination points, so that, for example, various service function changes could be constructed across the network. So our explicit no goal is to actually define service functions. We only need service function IDs. We assume that service function instances, types and instances are defined someplace else, for example, by 8C or other SDOs. And the interested client would just will be able to look up these service functions, and to an extent that it can identify functions that are identical or similar in functions, that they can go basically substitute one with the other. Okay, so
1 minute, Igor.
Right. So just a simple example, right? So when we want to have a layer 3 VPN, which has also, say, delay constraints, the way we do it usually, we set up a T tunnel between P's, which is properly constrained, and then we connect VRFs over this tunnel, VRFs, the LSPs connecting these VRFs over this tunnel. So basically, this is how you can achieve the proper connectivity as well as proper T constraints. Okay, so you can see this as a simple service function, okay, with two service functions, and which is nested through the overlay properly constrained. So if you think about a more complex case, when you have more than two service functions, and when you have, for example, a multi-domain environment, when you want to have like a service function which is also constrained and could be orchestrated this way, then you can see that why, for example, those kind of topologies would be useful. Okay, and then we have like a various.
Last slide, please.
Yeah. Yeah. So just one thing. It's not just layer 3 service functions, right? So for example, one use case we consider, which is very important, is basically having regenerators on the optical network, and because regenerator pools are set only in the strategic places and pools of the network, they could be considered as service functions. So basically, one use case that you can use the topology to set up like optical trays as a service functions between regenerators. I mean to say that it's not necessarily service functions in terms of compute and storage as usual, but it's much wilder representation. And I think the service function aware topologies would be like a perfect way to model network slice, especially considering that they could be configured dynamically.
All right, so this is very interesting new work. And thank you for presenting it. If you have comments, please discuss on the list. So with that, we have a stand-in, and Mr. Liu. remote for Island Wang, whose Meet Echo stream doesn't seem to be working well. Thank you for stepping in. If you can go a little shorter, that'd be good. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, you're doing the next one also, so you have it between now and the end of the session.
I can.
Yeah, thank you. Adjust as you see fit.
I'm Lu Fang from China Mobile, and I will present CCDR's scenario simulation and suggestion to help people to understand another draft PCE in native IP networks requirement and why we do that. Here are 4 scenarios. The first scenario is the QoS assurance for hybrid cloud-based application. And a lot of enterprise are using public cloud to deploy their service, but they also have their own private cloud. So service providers network connect their private cloud and public cloud. And in service providers network, we want to use CCDR to make the QoS assurance for their traffic. And the second one is in some network, for example, in metro network, there are tidal phenomena. For example, the residential customer is connected to BRAS and enterprise customer is connected to SR. At daytime, SR uplink is busy, but at nighttime, BRAS uplink is busy. So if we can if we can build some local link between BRAS and SR, and we want to use CCDR to steer the traffic at daytime from SR to BRAS, and at nighttime we can steer traffic from BRAS to SR. So we can use their uplinks more efficiently. And this is second scenario. And for the third scenario, it's similar to the previous one. And in this picture, we can see IDC's uplink and metro networks uplink. They are all asymmetry. If we can use CCDR to steer traffic between IDC and MAN, we can deal with the asymmetry link of IDC and the metro network to some level. And the last scenario is was mentioned in the last meeting in Chicago, and it's a very common problem in service providers network. Temporal congestion happens in service providers network. For example, during the busy time from 9 p.m. to from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Congestion happens in some links, but a lot of links are not so busy. So we want to use CCDR to steer traffic from the congested link to uncongested links to increase the whole link utilization in service providers network. And so we do some simulation based on a simulation topology. This topology includes 100 core node and 400 edge node. All core nodes are cross-mesh connected, and each edge node is connected to 2 to 30 core node. And the bandwidth of all links is 100 gigabit per second, and the metric between core node is from 60 to 100 randomly. And the metric of link between edge node and core node is set to 1000 to 1060 randomly. And we also set link aggregation threshold. For the link between core node, it's 80%. For the link between edge node and the core node, it's 90%. And here is the background traffic. We built a traffic matrix of 500 by 500, and each traffic between two nodes, the traffic is set to from 10 megabit per second to 7 gigabit per second randomly. And after we put the background traffic to the simulation topology, we based on shortest path protocol, we found about 20% links become congested, and the average congestion degree is about more than 10%. And here, the following is the two simulations for the scenario 1 and scenario 4. Here is the simulation for scenario 1 for the QoS assurance. And we add 1,000 more flow into the simulation topology with the simulation background traffic. We found most of the flow will pass the congested link. But after we add optimization mechanism, we found just a few flow will meet the congestion situation. And here is the simulation for the scenario 4. It's a simulation for the temporal congestion elimination. And the left up picture is the background traffic situation. Just now I have show it. About 20% link is congested, and the average congestion degree is about 10%. But after optimization, the congestion degree decreased to about 2%. So based on the scenarios description and the simulation, we think it is feasible. It is feasible to deploy PCE in a native network to optimize our network and the traffic. And we think for the scenarios, the solution should be easy to deploy within one domain or more domains. And the solution should decrease the complexity or do not add more complexity to the current distributed protocol. And the solution should decrease the burden on network devices. And we have submitted two drafters for the solution. One is PCE in native IP network. This draft has been presented for several times and also in Chicago's meeting. And later I will present BGP community PCE for supplement. So for the further action, we hope to move this work forward and define some standard way to do PCE in native IP network. And we request for the PCE in native IP network at a working group draft. And also we welcome more comments, suggestions, and more scenarios. Thank you.
So we pretty much exhausted the time for the slot. What we do have a question for is to see if this is an area the working group wants to work on. So before we lose the routing working group chair, who's walking out of the room, I guess the question is TE for native IP networks something we want to be spending time on as a working group? Our charter is TE. We certainly have in scope things like we've worked on a long time, MPLS. We have in scope things like SR. with MPLS. SR is also going to do IPv6. Do we want to be talking about TE for IP in this group or not? And it may be that we're so late in the session that we don't have the attention of folks anymore, like our AD. I don't know if she wants to chime in, but this is a good question for the group. Does anyone want to voice an opinion on whether we should or should not be doing TE for IP in this group?
Julien Meric, I still struggle to map this to my actual operational needs. So at this stage, my personal answer would be no.
So are you saying no to the topic area?
Yeah.
Are you saying no to the
IPT,
specific work or specific proposals?
The way it's presented today doesn't suit my requirement or anything, so far, no. Maybe if you have other way to describe the scope of the problem, I could change my opinion on that.
Okay, so the feedback for the authors would be to come back and focus more on what problem they're trying to solve before jumping to solution. Okay, that's good feedback. And remember, he's the PCE working group chair, so that's an important position.
Yeah, my name is Michael, and I also have some doubts that in the way how it's presented here, this is a good starting point. Also keep in mind for some of the solutions that you're presenting here, there is existing work, how you can do this in IP. And it's not exactly clear to me what added value the solutions that you present here are compared to the techniques that are out there in IP already. So that's, there might be sweet spots here, but I think you've not well presented it so far.
Okay.
Okay, this is Sun Chun from China Telecom. In our network, we have a very large network, and we have very different kinds of devices supporting TE or not. So we really think this work is a very valuable and interesting topic, and we really hope a solution can solve the problem in our network. So we think this is a very important topic.
Thank you for that input. I think for the group, coming back and talking a little bit about the problem would be helpful. Obviously, you don't want to disclose too much about the internals of your network. That's proprietary. We respect that. But talking about the problem and helping educate the group on what the problem is you're trying to solve would be useful before jumping into the solutions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
From our AD?
And speaking as AD, yeah, I've avoided to say anything on this because I look at it as very early work, and it's very difficult to judge, if this fits in or not. So I would say the same. You need to be more explicit on what the application is, the use cases, before jumping to the solutions, and then we can see if it fits in or not.
I just want to add some information. And usually, I'm from China Mobile, and just now, Chung Sun is from China Telecom, and we usually have two networks. One is a pure IP network for the internet traffic, and another one is the MPLS IP network is for some enterprise service and some internal service. So if we only have solution for MPLS traffic engineering, we can't deal with the problem in our pure IP network.
Yeah, I think there's a problem to be solved here. I think we need a little more education. So if you could, even if you have existing text, if you can bring that and just focus on that and talk about it maybe on the working group a little bit. Yeah, and talk about it on the list a little bit and say, here's really the problem we're trying to solve. Maybe that'll help bring some people along. But right now, by jumping to the solutions, I think people are not necessarily agreeing with the solutions, which means they're not going to want to work on the problem at all. Let's get agreement to work on the problem, then go to the solutions.
Okay.
And I think we're actually out of time, so we have to do that on the list. Okay, so thank you very much for stepping in for the presentation. Appreciate it. We're 5 minutes over. Thank you all for sticking it out. We will see you
On Thursday.
right, Thursday, 1:30, Congress Hall 1, so a different room. Thank you very much for participating.